G'day everyone, Asian Day here. We're going to do the in-depth review of this MSI Prestige 14 Evo A11M. Now MSI are more well known for their gaming devices and their components, and this is our 14-inch business laptop. That's right, it's a business laptop. So when I was offered the chance from Intel to have a look at this MSI laptop, I definitely jump at the chance of it because it also houses the new Intel Evo as well. So we're going to actually have a look at the temperatures as well as fan noise of this computer, and we'll also look at other features of this computer. Now I will be putting timestamps along this video so you can actually skip to the different sections that you may be interested, just to help you guys out. Now first off, what this computer can be configured with. Now of course with the processor wise, it is Intel Evo. Now that is actually not a processor, that's actually a certification from Intel, and they means that the laptop must meet a certain requirements for it to actually get the good stamp of Intel Evo. And the first one is, of course, its processor. It has to have 11th gen Intel, and that's what this one has got. The Prestige 14 Evo comes with an Intel Core i7-1185 G7. Now as for RAM wise, it can go up to a maximum capacity of 32 gigs. Now that is soldered to the system board, so you need to be careful when you actually purchase this computer to actually configure to the right amount, because you can't upgrade it later on. Now as for storage wise, it has one slot of M.2, and as for the graphics, it's just using the Intel integrated graphics, and this is the new one with the 11th gen Intel Core, and it does use the RS XE, and that's what I'm very excited about, and we'll get through the performance of it later on in this video. As for the display wise, it is running a full HD IPS display, and it is a 16:9 ratio, and the bezel on it is pretty much very thin. It's got very narrow bezel, which is absolutely gorgeous to see, and you've got a bit of a matte feel to this, and this one has no touch as well. Now I will be testing out the brightness of a display later in video, and also the color gamut of later in video as well. Let's have a look at the port. Starting on the left hand side, we've got two of the new Thunderbolt 4 ports, which is USB Type-C ports. And looking on the right hand side of the computer, starting on the right, we've got a USB 2 port, which is really interesting. They didn't put a USB 3.2 Gen 1 port instead these days. And then after that, we've got a micro SD card reader, and then the headphone jack. There's also a 720p webcam located on top of the display, and there's also an infrared camera to help with the Windows Hello sign-ins, so you can actually do the facial recognition. This is a recording from the 720p webcam, and this is the video and audio unedited, so you can hear and see what it looks like. Now as always, I've actually got two types of lights turned on. I've got one of my studio lights turned on, and I've also got the down lights that's turned on in this room. Now I'm going to turn off my studio light off so you can actually see this adjust, which actually adjusts pretty quick, I must admit, compared to a lot of other laptops I've tested. And I've actually got 4 downlights currently turned on. I've got 2 in front of me and 2 behind me. Now the 2 in front of me is quite far away, so it's a little bit dark on my face here. So in an office environment, you actually see probably a little bit more light in your face there. Now I'd love to hear what your thoughts are of the video and audio of this webcam. Now I'm going to turn on my studio light so you can see what it looks like again, and of course with better lighting, better picture. As for keyboard, it is housing quite a bit of a unique keyboard for my eyes, and it is a backlit keys. So there are 4 settings to the backlit keys, and that is off, low, medium, and high. And each individual key is quite large, I've got to admit, and as for the texture of each keys, it is quite smooth for the keys, and it's got a bit of key travel which you'll be quite happy with, and they are quite soft, so you won't actually have too much of a sound from coming out of these keys there. And as for the spacing between each keys is actually quite narrow, so each key is large with narrow things. You can find it's actually going to be quite nice to type in. Now the keys on this keyboard has a different key arrangement. Now first off, you can straight away see on the right hand side underneath the power key is the delete key, insert key, and page up and page down. That is something you just got to get used to. And also on the right hand side of the keyboard is also where the function key, it shares with the control key. It actually splits that in half, so that's very different there. And as for the top keys, of course, is about half the size. That's nothing too crazy unique, but it's more about the key arrangement, and you just got to get used to the key arrangements. As for the trackpad, it is quite large, as you can see, and I was worried about it at the start because it may actually register my palm, because when you put it your palm rest and you start typing, your palm will touch the trackpad. That's how elongated it is. But I'm actually happy to say that I've been typing this for a bit of time and I did not have any issue with random mouse movements, so it has had a very good palm rejection. Now, as for the texture of the trackpad, it is gorgeously silky smooth. I've got to admit, I don't think I've actually felt anything that smooth before. It didn't have problems with my moist hands neither, so that is absolutely gorgeously good feel to the trackpad. Now, it is mechanical, so you actually can press it down, and it is hinged at the top, so it's only mechanical at the bottom here. Now, it also can do multi-gesture as well, so you can actually do your multi-gesture commands for Windows. And as you can probably see on the left hand side, it has the built-in fingerprint reader integrated with the trackpad, so that's a little bit different to me, but you'll find it's actually quite bad and you won't have any problems because it is quite a large trackpad. Now, it's actually still very nice to use for those people who just type and then just use your thumb to do the trackpad there, and it's actually quite happy to do that all the time, even with the palm rejection. So fantastic work from MSI with the palm rejection. Now, as for the build quality of this computer, it is made of magnesium all the way through, and it really does show because there is no flex in this at all. So this is fantastic in that sort of thing, and it's actually quite light still, and even for the keyboard there isn't too much flex at all as well too. So I definitely must admit, and even for the screen, it is quite well built, and also with the hinge area as well is actually quite well built as well. Now, I'm just going to quickly go through the one finger test so you can actually see what it looks like. So I'm just going to use one finger, and it does quite easily lift up, and then we can pretty much go all the way with one finger. That's how beautiful is that. And of course, this one is in the 2-1, so it goes up to 180 degrees. Now, I also will mention that for people who are asking me about will it open the lid automatically when you're actually holding it on the hinge side, and I'm happy to say it does not open automatically. So the hinge is doing quite a good job in holding itself and keeping it shut, yet you can also still open it with one finger. There are 2 speakers located on the bottom front of the computer, and when I measured out the maximum peak volume of the speakers, it managed to measure in at 75.2 decibels. So that's a bit of on the quiet side of things. So if you're going to take this computer out to do a presentation outdoors or even in a cafe, you may find you'll be struggling a little bit, but if you're indoors, you'll be happy fine for that. Now, as for the sound quality of this computer, it is a business class laptop, and it pretty much goes along with all the other business class laptop. They're pretty average speakers, I've got to say. There is not much bass at all. Actually, there's none bass at all, and it pretty much goes straight at its mids there. And when you go bring it to maximum volume, it does distort a little on the highs. As for the acoustic wise, it's pretty much the user and everywhere else as well too. It's pretty much all over the place, but the speakers probably could be improved in the next revision. The speakers is definitely not its strong point here at all. The Prestige 14 Evo comes with a 65-watt power adapter, and it is a square shaped power adapter, and it's actually quite light, and it does charge the computer using the USB-C port. Prestige 14 Evo houses a 52 watt-hour battery, and it does support rapid charge. And what that means is it can charge the battery from 0 to 80% in 1 hour's time. And I did perform the battery life test of this computer here, and with my battery life test, I do put a consistent workload all the way through until it pretty much drains out its battery, and I did test it in the 4 different types of modes. Now, in best performance mode, it managed to get 1 hour, and in better performance, it managed to get 1 hour and 10 minutes, so a little bit better. And in better battery mode, it managed to get 5 hours, and in battery saving mode, it managed to get 6 hours. Now, I also tested out the computer in my media mode, where the computer is connected to Wi-Fi and also streaming YouTube the whole entire time, and the screen brightness and the speakers was set to 50%, and it managed to get 9 hours. Now you should expect a little bit more better numbers than what I did, because I do put a consistent workload all the way through all this time, and most of the time with your workload it will be up and down, so you won't be actually draining the battery as much as I would be doing. So the weight of the Prestige 14 Evo is 1.21 kilos, and add in the 65 watt power adapter becomes a total weight of 1.49 kilos. When I tested out the temperatures and fan noise of this computer, when I put this computer on load, I found most of the heat is very different to a lot of the other laptops I tested. They're usually around about center of the keyboard. This is not. This one is actually near the W key on the left hand side of the keyboard, as well as where the palm rest is. Now, with the left side of the keyboard, that's actually where the processor sits, which is very different to a lot of other laptops there. And as for the palm rest, that's where the M.2 SSD hard drive sits as well. So those two places where you actually find most of the heat. When I performed the measures, my ambient temperature was 25 degrees Celsius. Yeah, it's actually quite hot here in Australia, and that was done at night time as well. So I did my base measurement when the computer was on idle, and the hottest area of the keyboard was 35.5 degrees Celsius, and the fan noise hit a maximum of 31 decibels, so that's pretty much quiet. Then I put the computer on 20% load, so that's pretty much what average use is. So tasks like office productivity work, as well as streaming videos and surfing the web, and the maximum temperature on the keyboard was 39 degrees Celsius, and the maximum fan noise was still 31 decibels, so still practically quiet. Then put the computer on 50% load, and the maximum temperature of the keyboard hit 44.5 degrees Celsius. And as for the fan noise, it hit a maximum of 34 decibels. Then I put the computer at 100% load, and the maximum temperature on the keyboard was 54 degrees Celsius. And as for the fan noise, hit a maximum of 36 decibels. I also measured the back cover bottom of the computer, and the hottest area measured in at 58.5 degrees Celsius, and the fan noise was still at 36 decibels. As you can see, this computer runs quite hot. Now I do have to make a special mention is that when this computer is running more than 50% load, or if it's just pretty much running really a lot of load, you more than likely won't be able to touch this computer because it runs that hot. The whole entire keyboard and the palm rest is quite hot to even touch. Especially when this computer running 100% load, you'll only be able to touch it for more than a second. It's that hot. So if you're doing some gaming or doing some other external, pushing this computer to its maximum performance, I'd definitely be connecting external keyboard and mouse because you won't be able to touch this. And especially do not put this computer on your lap. Actually, most likely, I don't advise any computer to be put on your lap, but this one especially, it is quite hot. I think this is probably the hottest computer that I've ever played with or even reviewed. This is a very hot computer when this thing is running on load. But if you're just doing average use, this thing is quite happy. And if you're actually doing some office productivity work and just only bringing the computer up to only about 30% load or so, but even that's just what you most of them like to do, just do a little bit of burst speed. But if you're actually doing some rendering, encoding, or even analyzing for a long period of time, this computer runs very hot and you more than likely won't be able to touch it. I'm just giving you a fair warning there, that's all. Looking at the processor stability performance over time, as well as if there is any thermal throttling. Now this MSI Prestige 14 is configured with an i7-1185G7 processor with a base clock speed of 3 gigahertz. Now this computer has been running on load for over 3.5 hours, so that's the processor, RAM, and also hard drive running mostly 100% over 3.5 hours. And I can tell you it pretty much average speed of the processor is anywhere between 3.6 gigahertz to about 3.9 gigahertz. So that's pretty much stable around about that. Mostly average around, I would say, about 3.7 gigahertz. So that's telling me that there's no thermal throttling because it is above the 3 gigahertz. And if for turbo throttling, it's actually not that much neither because it goes up to about 4.3 gigahertz. So it's not that much far away from the turbo throttling as well. So that's doing pretty well, I've got to say. But I can tell you definitely straight away, like the actual computer, anywhere you touch is pretty much only for 1 second you can touch. It is actually quite hot, the computer itself, but still able to maintain these high clock speed is quite amazing, I've got to agree. Let's see how long the computer is able to maintain a high clock speed for. So I've just got a stopwatch here and we're going to start it off to see how it hits. So at the moment we'll just start it off and we're currently about 4.2 gigahertz, which is great. 4.3 gigahertz, which is fantastic. And we're just going to slowly get this thing 4.28 gigahertz. It's able to stay there. It's great. I say if we get down to 4 and below, then this is when I'm going to stop the clock watch. So I've got 4.28 still, running quite happily at 4.28 at the moment. Still 4.28. Still running at 4.28, which is great. 4.3. And I'll start to maybe dip down a little bit here. So 4.28, this is holding very well. Must admit, it's holding very well at this high clock speed for a very long time at the moment. Going up to back to 4.3, 4.4, yeah, there we go, stop. And we just hit that. So as you can see, it's still gone back up again. So I'll just stop the clock watch, just say around about 2-minute mark is around about, this sounds good. As you can see, it's still running and it's still doing pretty well. There you go, now it's dropped down to 4. So now it's just starting to stabilize down. Nope, it's gone back up again. It's made a lie of me. And I haven't got this running here. And at the moment, you can see from the temperatures, I'm just going to run this off away from here so you can see it's still running quite hot. Sorry, not running quite hot, but you can see it hasn't really hit that thermal mark here. So it's still able to keep going up to this high speed here, and we've just now hit about 4 down here. So just over 2 minutes, I've got to say, it starts to come back down a little, but it's still quite maintaining a quite high turbo boost for a while. So I'm quite happy with that. I did perform the benchmarks for this Prestige 14 Evo, and this one's configured with an i7-1185G7 processor with 16 gigs of RAM and 512 SSD hard drive. So I'll put up the Passmark scores. Citybench R15 and R20, 3D Mark, PC Mark 10, Geekbench, Crystal Disk Mark, MATLAB 2020B, and Spec View Pref. The performance of this computer is actually quite eye-opening. So even with all this heat, it's still able to perform so well, especially the graphics part of this computer here. That's RSXE, that new RSXE is just quite amazing. It actually beats some of the discrete graphics that I've actually tested before, like the Quadro P520 or even the MX330. So those base discrete graphics, that's RSXE is the same or even beats it sometimes for some of the previous laptops I've tested out. So that's pretty amazing. It's not at the level of the GeForce 1650 yet, but it's still, this does very well. So you can play some games on this computer here. And I've got to say, even with the heat, it still performed very well, which is a bit of a surprise to me. Testing out the color gamut coverage of the display, it managed to measure at 96.7% sRGB coverage and 67.3% Adobe RGB coverage and 69.7% DCI P3 coverage. I also tested out for PWM, and I'm happy to announce it did not exhibit any PWM symptoms at all. The display now has been color calibrated using the X-Ray i1 display tool. So let's have a look at what it looks like at factory and after calibration to see if there is a color shift change. So this is what it looks like at our factory, and this is after calibration. So out of factory, after calibration. It's only gone a little bit slightly more warmer after calibration. So out of factory, it's a little bit more cooler. So I'm just going to go straight to the color so we can just change, see what that looks like down there. And this is out of factory after calibration. Only very slightly more warm again. I'll just do Pascal as well. So out of factory after calibration. It's also gone a little bit more lighter, you probably notice. And we'll just do a black and white just so you can see. So mid-tone black and white. So out of factory after calibration. Out of factory after calibration. Hopefully that gives you a bit of idea on the color calibrations on the screen, which is actually not bad at all. It's actually doing really well, I must admit. Let's test out the luminance or the brightness of the display. Now first off, I made sure in display settings I've got night light turned off, so there's no automatic adjustment of color or the brightness of the display. And I've also got the X-Ray i1 display tool to help me with the measurements for this. Now the measurement we need to take note of is this one here called current. It is measured in candela per square meter. So 1 candela per square meter equals 1 nit of brightness. Now I'm just going to bring it up to the maximum volume of the brightness of the display, and it is at level 10, and it is currently reading 295 candela per square meter. So it's around about 295 nits of brightness. So I'll take a guess the display screen is rated for 300, so it's just shy of that, or it's rated at 250, but I'm thinking about 300 it's rated at. And we're just going to quickly help for photographers and videographers. We're going to try and find that 120 candela per square meters, which is what the recommended one is. I'm just going to dial it down to value of 45, and we got 117. I'm just going to bring it up by 46 value, and look at 118, and I'll bring it up to 47. We're looking at 119 candela per square meters, which is what you'll be recommended to use. The MSI Prestige 14 Evo has a very nice, sleek, professional look to this computer, and is actually quite light as well. And as for the build construction, it is quite good as well. You can't find any problems with that, especially being a business laptop, and it's actually quite durable. Now, as for the display is actually quite nice, and as for the keyboard and trackpad, I can't really fault them as well. The trackpad, I really do love this trackpad. It is actually quite gorgeous, and definitely the feel is fantastic. And as for the performance, this was quite an eye-opening. It is very good performance, but you do need to take note of, if this computer is going to be doing a lot of num crunching for a very long period of time, this computer does get heated up quite a lot. So it's something to take note of. If you're just doing average use of this computer, this thing is absolute fine, and you'll actually find it's actually quite quiet as well too. It's got an okay amount of port selections. It would be nice to see a HDMI port into this computer here, especially when this is a business laptop where you're actually connected to a lot of projectors a lot of times, but else it's doing all right. So I can still recommend this computer here. Now, if you find this video informative or enjoyed it, or even just to support my channel, smack that like button for me. And if you haven't done already, subscribe to my channel by hitting the subscribe button on the screen. I do try to upload a new video every week. And just remember, imperfections in life makes it beautiful and interesting. I'll see you next video.